The late summer sun slanted across the glass walls of Hongqiao International Airport, painting the crowds with soft golden light. Amid the noise of rolling suitcases and the constant hum of announcements, Lin Xiao stood by the baggage claim, her shirt damp with sweat, but her eyes sharp, scanning for travelers who might need help. At 23, life hadn't been kind to her. She was a fresh graduate, armed with a degree in business management. But with the economy biting and her father long gone, dreams of a decent career had been pushed aside. Her mother's medical bills, her younger siblings' school fees, and the daily struggle of putting food on the table weighed heavier than any suitcase she lifted for strangers. That day, she had already carried 3 oversized cases for a wealthy family who didn't bother to say thank you. Her palms were raw, her back ached, but she forced a smile whenever anyone looked her way. Dignity mattered, even in hardship. As she adjusted her baseball cap and pushed 2 empty luggage trolleys aside, her gaze caught a tall figure emerging from the international arrivals gate. Meanwhile, Captain Li Wei, 31, walked briskly through the terminal, his navy blue pilot's uniform making him stand out in the sea of travelers. His shoulders were broad, his steps precise, but his brows furrowed as his phone pressed to his ear. "Mother, I'm back in Shanghai for just 2 days before flying to Hong Kong," he said with practiced patience. On the other end, Madame Li's voice was sharp and commanding. "Perfect. Once you reach Hong Kong, I'll arrange a proper dinner. Enough of this nonsense, Wei. You're not a child anymore. I will not watch you waste your life without giving me grandchildren. I already have 2 girls in mind, both from respectable families. I will." "Mother." His tone cut her off, clipped but not cold. "You don't need to worry about my marriage," she scoffed. "Don't tell me you still haven't found anyone suitable? I swear, you pilots think the whole world will wait for you. I will not let you die alone, Wei." Li Wei exhaled, tired of socialites who pretended to be sweet but rolled their eyes at his long flights. Tired of spoiled heiresses who looked at his uniform like it was another accessory for their Instagram posts. None of them had ever felt real to him. And then he saw her. She wasn't like the others. The girl ahead wore a plain white t-shirt tucked into simple jeans, her hair tied back in a low ponytail. No designer handbags, no heavy makeup. Instead, she had strength in her stride as she bent to lift 2 overstuffed suitcases belonging to an elderly man, her arms taut but graceful. She smiled gently at the old man as she set the luggage down, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Something about her, unadorned, genuine, radiant in effort rather than display, rooted Li Wei to the ground. His mother was still ranting, but her voice blurred into static. He lowered his phone, eyes following the girl as if he'd been hypnotized. Then, as if fate had planned it, she turned, noticed him standing idle with his own luggage, and walked straight toward him. "Sir," she said, her voice clear, unpretentious. "Do you need help with your suitcase? I can carry it to a cab for you." The words broke the invisible spell, snapping him back to reality. But instead of answering, he just stared, his throat suddenly dry. His heartbeat thumped harder than when he took off into turbulent skies. She snapped her fingers right in front of his eyes. "Hello? Are you listening? Do you need help or not?" Li Wei did something reckless. He reached for her wrist gently, pulling her a few steps away from the crowd, out of the stream of rushing passengers. She tensed immediately, ready to shout if needed. He met her startled gaze, his voice low but steady. "I know this is sudden, ridiculous, even, but I want to marry you." Lin Xiao's eyes widened. For a heartbeat, she thought she misheard him. Then her shock burned into anger. She yanked her hand free, her voice rising. "Are you insane? Do I look like a woman desperate enough to fall for a scam?" Heads were beginning to turn. Li Wei raised both palms, quickly pulling a sleek black card from his wallet. He held it up where she could see the embossed golden logo. "I'm not playing games," he said. "I'll pay you a large sum. Just pretend to be my wife. At least on paper. We get a marriage certificate and you go back to your life. I won't stop you from finding someone you truly love. All I ask is that you help me get my mother off my back. Lin Xiu stared at him, bewildered. A fake marriage? Was this some new type of rich man's joke? Her instinct was to walk away. But then his words replayed in her mind, large sum. Money. Enough, maybe, to pay for her mother's next surgery. Enough to keep her siblings from dropping out of school. Her pride battled her desperation, but desperation won. She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly. If I agree, how much are we talking about? Li Wei's lips curved just slightly, relief flashing across his face. Enough to change your life. 2 hours later, the unthinkable happened. At a quiet district office, the ink dried on 2 papers, binding their names together. Li Wei and Lin Xiu, husband and wife. When she stepped outside, the setting sun glowed against the city skyline, and her phone buzzed with a notification. Her bank account, once nearly empty, now showed a staggering balance. She pressed a hand over her chest, her breath hitching. For once, survival didn't feel so impossible. She walked home that evening with light steps, clutching the envelope that held her marriage certificate. And somewhere across town, in the back seat of his sleek black car, Captain Li Wei leaned against the leather, pulling out his own certificate. He stared at the photo of the girl beside him, her plain blouse, her faint smile, and for the first time in years he felt something rare. Not lust, not duty, but a quiet warmth that spread through him like sunrise. And when he smiled, it wasn't the polished, professional smile of a CO pilot. It was the smile of a man who had just stumbled upon something extraordinary. The sun had already dipped behind the concrete skyline by the time Lin Xiu stepped into the narrow lane that led to her family's modest apartment. The plastic grocery bag she carried swayed at her side, but tonight it wasn't groceries inside. It was her marriage certificate. Her fingers tightened around the envelope as her heartbeat grew louder. She had made a vow to herself, don't tell them. Not yet. Her family had struggled enough. If her younger brother or sister found out she married a stranger for money, they would never understand. Her mother, frail from illness, would cry herself sick. No, she would keep this a secret until she could figure out what it meant for her future. As she pushed the rusty gate open, the sound of laughter spilled into the evening air. Inside, her little brother Lin Tao was sprawled on the floor with comic books, while her younger sister Lin Mei practiced English phrases from a workbook. Their mother sat propped on a chair, knitting with slow, tired hands. "Xiu, you're home," her mother greeted softly, her eyes dim but warm. "Did you eat?" Lin Xiu forced a smile, hiding her trembling hand behind her back. "Not yet, but I'll cook something. Don't worry." She slipped the envelope into her room before anyone noticed and busied herself in the small kitchen. As she stirred a pot of noodles, she felt her phone buzz. A message appeared. "Unknown number. This is Li Wei. Save my contact." Her eyes froze on the name. Li Wei, her husband. The reality felt unreal, like she was living in a dream she couldn't wake from. She typed a quick reply. "Okay, don't message me too much. My family doesn't know." A few seconds later, another message came. "Understood. I'll only call when necessary. Rest well tonight." She stared at the screen for a moment, feeling an odd warmth in her chest at his last sentence. She shook her head, scolding herself. "Don't be foolish, Xiu. This is business, nothing more." Meanwhile, in a luxurious villa on the other side of Shanghai, Li Wei sat across from his mother at the dinner table. Crystal glasses clinked, but tension hung heavier than the fragrance of the food. Madame Li was elegant, every inch of her posture commanding. "Wei, next week in Hong Kong, I've arranged dinner with the Zhao family's daughter. She's refined, educated, and I'm already married." The words fell like a stone into water. The clinking stopped. Madame Li blinked once, then twice, her chopsticks frozen in midair. "What nonsense are you saying?" Li Wei reached calmly into his pocket and pulled out the fresh red certificate, sliding it across the table. The photo of him and Lin Xiu stared back in silence. Madame Li's face paled, then hardened. "Married? To who? When?" Li Wei leaned back, his expression unreadable. Today, at the civil office. Her name is Lin Xiu. Lin Xiu? She whispered the name as if it were foreign poison on her tongue. And what does her family do? Li Wei's silence stretched. He didn't have the answer, nor did he care to give one. What mattered was that, for the first time, he felt free from his mother's suffocating matchmaking. Madame Li slammed her chopsticks down, fury sparking in her eyes. Do you even know who she is? What background she comes from? You marry a girl I've never heard of, and you expect me to accept it? But Li Wei simply gathered his papers and stood. Mother, you wanted me married. Now I am. Good night. He left the dining hall, his heart oddly light as he walked out into the cool night air. He pulled out his phone and opened the marriage certificate again. The girl's eyes in the photo were calm, even a little shy. Something about her presence had lodged itself in his mind, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't regret a thing. Back in Lin Xiu's world, that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lin Xiu sat at her desk. She took the certificate out of its envelope, staring at it under the yellow glow of her study lamp. Her name written beside his, her photo pressed beside his. They were tied, on paper at least. The payment he'd given her sat like a heavy promise in her bank account. She could pay her mother's next hospital bill. She could clear the debts. She could even start saving for her siblings' future. For the first time in years, there was a little bit of breathing space. And yet, her chest ached with a strange confusion. What kind of man proposes marriage to a stranger within minutes of meeting her? What kind of future lay ahead in this fake bond? She closed her eyes, whispering into the night, Dear God, please let this be worth it. The next morning, the city buzzed awake. Lin Xiu hurried to her part-time job at a cafe, tying her apron and brushing flour from her cheek. She thought she could slip back into her normal routine, but her world was no longer the same. Because at noon, just as she was delivering a tray of coffee to a table, a tall figure in casual clothes and sunglasses entered. He carried himself with that same calm confidence, but his presence filled the cafe like a storm. Her tray nearly slipped from her hands. Li Wei, her husband, and he was walking straight toward her. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and a stream of sunlight followed Li Wei as he stepped inside. His casual attire, dark jeans, crisp white shirt, and aviator sunglasses, couldn't disguise the aura he carried. He was a man used to commanding attention, and he drew curious stares from nearly everyone in the small shop. But his eyes were fixed only on Lin Xiu. She stood frozen with a tray in her hands, her lips parting slightly in shock. Yesterday they had signed papers, strangers bound by an impossible agreement. And now, here he was, invading the little pocket of normalcy she had carved for herself. Her boss, the cafe owner, peeked from behind the counter, whispering to another waitress. That man looks like he walked out of a magazine. Who is he? Lin Xiu's pulse raced. She hurried forward, lowering her voice sharply as she cornered him near a quiet booth. What are you doing here? Li Wei removed his sunglasses slowly, his eyes meeting hers with calm determination. Checking on my wife. Her breath caught. Don't say that here, she hissed, glancing around nervously. Luckily, the other staff had turned away, busying themselves, but a few customers were still stealing glances. Relax, he said, sliding into the booth. I just came for coffee. Nothing more. She clenched her fists, torn between irritation and unease. He looked too comfortable, as if this were natural, as if being in her world, so far from his glittering, wealthy one, didn't bother him in the slightest. Against her will, she brought him a menu, setting it down a little too hard. What will you have? You! Her head snapped up, eyes wide. His lips curved in the faintest smile. As my server, bring me whatever coffee you recommend. Heat rushed to her cheeks. She stomped back to the counter, ignoring her co-workers' playful nudges and whispered giggles. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared his drink, and she couldn't decide if it was anger, embarrassment, or something else she didn't dare name. When she returned, he accepted the cup with a nod, sipping slowly as if savoring not the drink but her presence. "You work too hard," he said quietly once she leaned down to clear the next table. She froze, glancing at him. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I saw you at the airport, remember?" His gaze didn't waver. "Carrying other people's burdens like they were your own. That's not something anyone can fake." Her chest tightened. No one ever noticed her effort, at least not like this. But she quickly shook the thought away. "Don't romanticize it. I just need money. Then let me make things easier for you." His words were soft but firm. She bristled. "We already made a deal. You paid me. Don't interfere with my life." For a moment, silence stretched between them. He studied her carefully, as though she were a puzzle he was determined to solve. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled faintly. "You're tougher than most people I know. That's rare." Her heart gave a strange lurch, and she turned abruptly, retreating to the kitchen to hide her flustered expression. Later that evening, after his coffee had long gone cold, Li Wei finally stood. He left a bill far larger than the cost of his drink on the table. As Lin Xiu tried to hand it back, he leaned close, his voice low. "Keep it. Think of it as lunch money from your husband." Her eyes widened, her cheeks flaming red. Before she could argue, he slipped on his sunglasses and walked out, leaving behind the weight of his words and a trail of whispers from her curious co-workers. That night at home, her sister, Lin Mei, noticed her distracted expression during dinner. "Jejia, why are you smiling at your rice like it's a boyfriend?" Lin Xiu nearly choked. "What nonsense are you talking about? Eat your food." But later, when the lights were off and everyone was asleep, she pulled the certificate from her drawer again. Her thumb traced over his name, her mind replaying his words at the cafe. "Checking on my wife." She shook her head furiously and shoved the paper back. This wasn't love. This was a transaction. Nothing more. So why did her heart feel so unsteady? Meanwhile, at the Li family villa, Madame Li sat with her assistant, reviewing files. Photographs of elite young women were spread across the table, each a suitable match for her son. But her thoughts kept circling back to the mysterious name on the marriage certificate, Lin Xiu. "Find out everything about her," Madame Li ordered coldly. "Her family, her education, her background. I want to know exactly what kind of woman dares to tie herself to my son." The assistant bowed. "Yes, madam." In her mind, Madame Li swore, "Whoever this Lin Xiu is, she won't last long in my son's world." The next day, Li Wei's driver pulled the car outside a university campus. From the back seat, Li Wei looked down at his phone, a small smile tugging at his lips. A new message glowed on his screen. "Don't come to my work again." He typed back quickly. "Fine. Then I'll pick you up after work instead." She stared at the message in disbelief, groaning aloud. What had she gotten herself into? But deep down, beneath her panic, an unfamiliar warmth spread slowly through her chest. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of the Lin family apartment, painting the cramped living room in streaks of pale gold. Lin Xiu had already woken early, as she always did, preparing rice porridge and boiled eggs before rushing to her cafe shift. Her mother coughed softly in the corner, and her younger siblings got ready for school. Everything felt ordinary, almost peaceful, until her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She frowned when she saw the name flashing. "Li Wei." "Good morning, wife. Don't forget to eat breakfast." Her spoon nearly clattered into the bowl. "This man," she muttered under her breath. She quickly deleted the messages, afraid one of her siblings might see. But her sister, Lin Mei, already had sharp eyes. "Jejia, who's texting you so early? Is it a boyfriend?" Lin Xiu's face flushed crimson. "No, don't talk nonsense. It's a customer asking about coffee beans." Her siblings giggled, but her mother's gentle gaze lingered longer than usual, as if she could sense something shifting in her daughter's life. Across the city, inside his sleek car, Li Wei leaned against the leather seat, his tie slightly loosened, his hand resting on his phone. The driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Boss, will we head to the company now?" Li Wei's lips curved slightly. Not yet. Let's take a detour. He gave the address of the Lin family's neighborhood. The old buildings were nothing like the villas and glass towers Li Wei was accustomed to. Narrow alleyways, clotheslines strung between balconies, and children chasing each other on cracked pavement filled his view. When his black car pulled up, it stood out like an alien ship. Curious neighbors peeked from their windows. And then, just as she was leaving for work, Lin Xiu stepped out of the apartment gate. She froze at the sight of the car parked near the lane. The tinted window rolled down, and there he was, calm, composed, devastatingly handsome in his tailored suit. "Get in," Li Wei said simply. She darted her eyes around, panic rising. "Are you crazy? People will see." "Then let them," he replied smoothly. "Or do you want me to come out and greet your family instead?" Her blood drained from her face. Without another word, she rushed to the car and slipped inside, glaring at him. "Why are you here? I told you not to interfere with my life." He studied her flushed face, amused. "I'm not interfering. I'm picking up my wife. Stop calling me that in public," she hissed, crossing her arms. "This is just an act, remember? We're strangers outside the certificate." His expression softened, his voice lowering. "You may think so, but paper or not, the moment your name stood beside mine, you became someone important." Her heart skipped, and she quickly looked away, staring out the window. "Don't say things like that. I don't need false kindness." He didn't argue. Instead, he simply dropped her off at the cafe, ignoring the whispers of her coworkers as she stepped out of a luxury car. Meanwhile, at the Li family estate, Madame Li sat in her study, a stack of files in front of her. Her assistant, Mr. Zhang, spoke carefully. "Madam, we found information about Miss Lin Xiu. She graduated from a local university with good grades, but she comes from a working-class family. Her mother is ill, her father passed away years ago. She works multiple part-time jobs to support her siblings." Madame Li's lips thinned. "So, a poor girl with nothing to her name." "Yes, madam." She slammed the folder shut, her voice sharp. "Unacceptable. She is not the kind of woman who belongs in the Li family. This marriage will not last." Her eyes glinted with determination. "If my son will not end it himself, then I will make sure she leaves him." That evening, after her shift, Lin Xiu walked home exhausted, carrying a small bag of discounted bread for her siblings. But as she turned the corner, she saw a sleek black car waiting again. Li Wei leaned casually against it, his pilot jacket draped over one arm. Neighbors had gathered, whispering excitedly. "Who is that? He looks like someone from TV. Isn't that Xiu's friend? No way, he's too rich-looking." Mortified, Lin Xiu rushed to him, her face burning. "Stop coming here. You're drawing attention." Li Wei's eyes softened at her flustered expression. "Then let me take you and your family out for dinner. At least once." Her jaw dropped. "Are you insane? My family doesn't know anything about this marriage. What do you think they'll say if a strange man suddenly shows up calling himself my husband?" He tilted his head slightly. "Then introduce me as your friend. For now." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She wanted to refuse, to push him away. But then she saw the sincerity in his eyes, not the cold calculation of a businessman, not the arrogance of a man with wealth, but something quieter, something that unnerved her. Before she could answer, her younger brother Lin Tao poked his head out of the gate. "Jie, who's that man?" Caught, she froze. Li Wei stepped forward with a polite smile, his hand extended. "I'm a friend of your sister's." Her siblings' eyes widened with curiosity. Her mother, weak but watchful, stepped out too, leaning against the doorway. The air thickened with unspoken tension. Lin Xiu's heart pounded. She hadn't planned for their worlds to collide so soon. And yet, here he was, standing before her family, already crossing the line between fake and real. The small living room of the Lin family apartment was alive with a tension Lin Xiu could almost slice with a knife. Her younger brother and sister hovered near the doorway, peeking at Li Wei with round eyes, while their mother leaned quietly against the wall, her expression unreadable. For the first time, the two halves of Lin Xiao's world, her modest family and the man she had secretly married, were colliding. She rushed to speak, her voice tight. "He's just a friend from work. He came to visit. Don't think too much about it." Her mother tilted her head slightly, her sharp gaze catching the faint flush on her daughter's cheeks. She didn't question her outright, but there was a knowing glimmer in her tired eyes. Li Wei, however, didn't falter. He stepped forward, bowing his head politely. "Auntie, it's nice to meet you. My name is Li Wei. Please forgive me for intruding uninvited." Lin Mei tugged at her sister's sleeve, whispering, "Jejia, he's so handsome. Are you sure he's just a friend?" "Quiet," Lin Xiao hissed, her face burning. But to her horror, Li Wei only chuckled softly, as if he'd overheard. His gaze flickered to her, and his lips curved. "I'd like to treat everyone to dinner tonight. It's the least I can do for troubling your family." "No, that's not necessary," Lin Xiao said quickly, panic rising. But before she could steer him away, her younger brother Lin Tao's eyes lit up. "Dinner outside? At a restaurant? Really?" Lin Mei clapped her hands together. "Can we go, Mama? We haven't eaten out in so long." Her mother's gaze lingered on Li Wei for a long moment before she finally nodded faintly. "If he's offering sincerely, we shouldn't refuse." Lin Xiao's heart sank. This is a disaster. The dinner. An hour later, the Lin family sat inside a modest but clean restaurant, far from the glittering five-star hotels Li Wei was accustomed to. The smell of stir-fried vegetables and steamed buns filled the air, and the wooden tables gleamed under warm yellow lights. Lin Tao bounced in his seat, already digging into a plate of dumplings. Lin Mei sipped her orange soda like it was liquid gold, grinning from ear to ear. Only Lin Xiao sat stiffly, her chopsticks untouched, her eyes darting between Li Wei and her family like a watchdog. To her dismay, Li Wei looked perfectly at ease. He rolled up his sleeves, poured tea for her mother with respectful care, and spoke in a tone softer than she'd ever heard from him. "Auntie, I heard from Xiao that you haven't been feeling well. Are you receiving proper treatment?" Her mother hesitated, taken aback. "It's just a chronic illness. Nothing too serious." Li Wei's brows furrowed slightly, but he didn't press. Instead, he smoothly turned the conversation toward Lin Tao's school and Lin Mei's hobbies. Before long, her siblings were chatting freely with him, laughing as though he'd always been part of their family. Lin Xiao could hardly believe her eyes. What is he doing? Why is he so good at this? At one point, Lin Mei leaned close to whisper loudly, "Jejia, I like him. He's much better than the boys around here. If you don't want him, can I have him when I grow up?" Lin Xiao nearly choked on her tea, while Li Wei laughed quietly, his deep voice rumbling with warmth. "Sorry, Mei, but I'm afraid your sister saw me first." Her cheeks blazed crimson, and she shot him a furious glare. But her family just laughed, delighted by the playful exchange. For the first time in years, their dinner table was filled with more than just the sound of chewing. It was filled with joy. After dinner, when they returned home, Lin Mei and Lin Tao raced upstairs, still chattering about the meal. Her mother stayed behind in the small courtyard, her shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders. Lin Xiao began ushering Li Wei toward the gate. "All right, you've done enough. You can leave now." But her mother's voice stopped them. "Xiao," she turned. "Yes, Mama?" Her mother's eyes moved from her daughter to Li Wei, then back again. "This friend of yours? He isn't just a friend, is he?" Lin Xiao froze, panic flooding her chest. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Before she could think of an excuse, Li Wei stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Auntie, I know this seems sudden, but I assure you, my intentions toward Xiao are sincere. Please allow me to take care of her, even if only in the smallest ways." Her mother studied him for a long time, silent stretching. At last, she sighed softly. "You seem like a good man, Mr. Li, but good intentions aren't enough. Xiao has carried this family on her back for years. Don't hurt her. Her words carried the weight of a warning. Li Wei's gaze didn't waver. I won't. That night, back in her room, Lin Xiu paced like a caged bird, her heart still racing from the evening. Why is he doing this? She muttered, clutching her pillow. Why is he trying to win over my family? We're supposed to be strangers. A fake couple. That was the deal. Yet her mind wouldn't stop replaying the sight of her siblings' laughter, her mother's softened expression, and Li Wei's calm, steady promise. I won't hurt her. She pressed a hand against her chest. Her heart was beating faster than it ever had before. Meanwhile, at the Li family villa, Madame Li was not smiling. Her assistant placed a fresh envelope on the table. Inside were photographs, Li Wei dining with the Lin family, laughing with children, walking side by side with Lin Xiu. Madame Li's face darkened. So, he's already making himself at home in that girl's world. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. If she thinks she can climb into our family, she's mistaken. I'll show her the difference between the sky and the mud. The week rolled on quietly, but for Lin Xiu, nothing felt normal anymore. Every day, she balanced trays at the cafe. Every night she returned to her cramped home. But the thought of Li Wei kept intruding like a stubborn shadow. His smile at the dinner table, the way her siblings leaned toward him with effortless trust, the promise he'd made to her mother. I won't hurt her. Those words shouldn't have mattered. This was supposed to be a transaction. Yet somehow, they echoed in her chest, louder with each passing day. High above the city, in the sleek glass tower of Li Corporation, Li Wei sat at the head of the boardroom table. His colleagues droned on about new airline routes, but his thoughts drifted to the girl who still avoided looking him in the eyes whenever he teased her. When the meeting adjourned, his assistant approached quietly. President Li, Madame Li has requested your presence for dinner tonight. Li Wei's jaw tightened. His mother's requests were rarely optional. Fine. Clear my evening schedule. That evening at the villa, the dinner table was set elegantly, candlelight flickering against polished silverware. Madame Li sat at the head, her posture sharp as a blade. You've been busy lately, Wei? She said smoothly, her voice deceptively light. Not with work, but with other things. He didn't respond, calmly pouring himself a glass of wine. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Lin Xiu, serving coffee, carrying groceries, riding the bus late at night. Li Wei's hand stilled. Madame Li's eyes narrowed. This girl, a waitress, a baggage carrier. Do you really think she belongs in the Li family? Li Wei's gaze hardened. She's my wife. That's all that matters. On paper, perhaps. Madame Li's tone cut like ice. But marriage is more than paper. She has nothing. No background, no influence, no power. She'll drag you down. She won't. His voice was quiet, but unshakable. Madame Li's lips thinned. We'll see. Inwardly, she had already made her decision. If her son refused to cut ties, then she would make life unbearable for the girl until she left on her own. Back at the cafe. The next day, Lin Xiu was balancing 3 plates when the cafe door swung open. A group of well-dressed women entered, their heels clicking against the floor. Their leader, a sharp-eyed woman in a designer coat, surveyed the cafe like it was beneath her. Excuse me, she called, waving Lin Xiu over. Do you have almond milk? Or is that too fancy for a place like this? The others laughed cruelly. Lin Xiu forced a polite smile. We have almond milk, miss. What would you like to order? 4 lattes, the woman sneered. And hurry, I don't have all day. As Lin Xiu walked away, she heard the whispers. Isn't she the girl President Li married? Impossible. Look at her. She's nothing but a servant. Exactly. Madame Li must be losing her mind. Her hands trembled, but she kept moving. She couldn't afford to show weakness. When she delivered their drinks, one of the women, accidentally, knocked her cup over, spilling hot liquid onto the floor. Oops, she said sweetly. Clumsy of me. Clean it up, won't you? The group burst into laughter. Lin Xiu's cheeks burned, but she crouched silently with a cloth. Inside, humiliation clawed at her. So this is what they think of me, a nobody. Just then, a familiar shadow fell across the table. Is there a problem here? The laughter died instantly. Li Wei stood there, tall and commanding, his gaze as sharp as glass. The women scrambled to their feet. President Li, we were just leaving. His voice was clipped, final. Without another word, they gathered their bags and fled, leaving the untouched drinks behind. Lin Xiu blinked up at him from the floor, cloth still in her hand. Why are you here again? He bent down, taking the cloth from her gently. Because I knew this would happen. Her throat tightened. Your mother sent them, didn't she? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. She stood abruptly, anger flaring through her humiliation. This is exactly why I didn't want to get involved with you. My life was already hard enough. Now it's worse because of you. Her voice cracked, but she refused to let the tears fall. She pushed past him, rushing toward the back door of the cafe. Li Wei followed, catching her wrist just as she stepped outside. Lin Xiu. His voice was low, urgent. I can't control my mother, but I can protect you. Just trust me. She shook her head, her voice trembling. How can I trust you when my whole world is falling apart because of this marriage? You may not care what people say, but I do. I live in their world, not yours. For the first time, Li Wei's mask cracked. There was pain in his eyes. Pain she didn't expect to see from a man who usually carried himself like steel. Then let me share your world, he said quietly. Even if it means walking through the fire with you. Her breath caught, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to cling to that promise. But could she? That night, back in her small room, Lin Xiu sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. No messages came, no calls, only silence. She should have felt relieved, but instead, the quiet made her ache in a way she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, at his penthouse apartment, Li Wei sat alone, nursing a glass of whiskey. He replayed her words again and again. How can I trust you? For the first time in years, he felt powerless. But one thing was certain, he wasn't letting her go. The days after the cafe incident were heavy with silence. Lin Xiu tried to bury herself in work, serving coffee, washing dishes, carrying trays until her arms ached. Anything to distract her from the look in Li Wei's eyes that day. That raw sincerity. It unsettled her more than all the humiliation she'd faced. But at night, lying awake on her thin mattress, her heart betrayed her. She replayed his words. Then let me share your world, even if it means walking through the fire with you. Her throat tightened each time. She wanted to dismiss it, laugh at the absurdity of a CEO pilot walking through her world. But the memory of his hand gripping her wrist, the quiet urgency in his tone, it wouldn't leave her. Meanwhile, Madame Li's patience had run thin. She sat in her private study, flipping through a glossy dossier her aide had prepared. So, she murmured, her red nails tapping against the table. Our little Lin Xiu's family lives in a rented flat. Her mother is chronically ill, and her younger siblings still depend on her wages. The aide nodded. Yes, madam. Their financial situation is fragile. A slow smile curved Madame Li's lips. Good. Then it won't take much to break her. The next morning, a notice appeared taped to the door of Lin Xiu's building. Eviction notice. Rent overdue. Vacate within 7 days. Her mother's face drained of color when she saw it. Xiu'er, what do we do? Lin Xiu clenched her fists, her heart racing. She had paid the rent just last week. Something was wrong. She stormed down to the landlord, who only shrugged. Orders from above, he muttered nervously. Don't ask me. I can't go against it. Her mind immediately went to Madame Li. Of course. This was no coincidence. When Li Wei returned from a 2-day flight, his assistant hesitated before handing him the report. President Li, your mother has intervened with Miss Lin's housing situation. The words hit him like a slap. Without hesitation, he dialed Lin Xiu's number. She answered after the third ring, her voice tired. What is it? Why didn't you tell me about the eviction notice? Her breath caught. So you already know. I'll fix it. No. Her voice was sharp, cutting. Don't interfere, Li Wei. This is my family's home. My problem, not yours. Your problem is mine now. His tone left no room for argument. But Lin Xiao's pride flared, burning hotter than her fear. That's exactly the issue. You think everything can be solved with your money and power. But some of us don't want to be rescued. We just want to stand on our own. The line went dead. She had hung up. Li Wei stared at the phone, his jaw tightening. She thinks I see her as weak. But she's wrong. I've never admired anyone's strength more. That night, Lin Xiao stayed late at the cafe, scrubbing tables until the manager told her to go home. As she walked down the dimly lit street, her bag heavy with leftover bread she'd saved for her siblings, she spotted a sleek black car parked at the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Madame Li herself. Miss Lin, Madame Li said coolly, her heels clicking as she approached. Or should I call you Mrs. Li? Though that title doesn't suit you. Lin Xiao stiffened, her grip tightening on the bag. What do you want? Madame Li's smile was razor sharp. I want you to disappear. Name your price. I'll transfer the money tonight if you sign the annulment papers. Lin Xiao's chest tightened. For a fleeting second, the thought of escaping this nightmare was tempting. She could use the money to secure her family's future, to finally breathe. But then she remembered the way Li Wei had stood in front of her at the cafe, the quiet shield in his eyes, the way he had told her, she's his wife. That's all that matters. Anger surged. She lifted her chin. You think I'll sell myself off like some trinket? I may be poor, Madame Li, but I still have dignity. For the first time, Madame Li's smile faltered. You'll regret this, she hissed, before sliding back into her car and driving away. Later that night, as Lin Xiao walked into her building, she noticed something strange. The eviction notice was gone. A new paper was pinned up. Rent paid in advance. Tenancy secure. Her breath hitched. Only one person could have done this. Anger and gratitude battled inside her chest. She wanted to scream at him for meddling, but at the same time, the weight crushing her shoulders suddenly felt lighter. In the distance, across the street, a familiar figure stood beneath a street lamp. Li Wei. He didn't approach her, didn't say a word. He just stood there, his gaze soft and unyielding, as though silently telling her, You're not alone. Not anymore. Her throat ached. She turned away quickly, afraid he'd see the tears welling in her eyes. Back in his car, Li Wei leaned back against the seat, staring at the faint light from her apartment window. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow, I won't let her go. Not to my mother. Not to fear. Not to anyone. And for the first time in his life, the man who had everything realized this wasn't about winning. This was about cherishing. The week that followed was tense and strangely quiet. Lin Xiao went about her days with a rigid determination, avoiding Li Wei whenever she could. She worked longer hours at the cafe, picked up night shifts cleaning offices, and still carried the weight of her family on her back. Her siblings noticed the dark circles forming beneath her eyes, but she brushed it off with a smile. Yet every time she returned home, she couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching over her. Sometimes it was the faint sound of a car engine purring a street away. Other times the glimpse of a tall silhouette standing under a street lamp before disappearing into the night. She knew it was him, Li Wei. Her heart should have felt comforted, but instead, it wrestled with fear. If I let him in, if I rely on him, what happens when he leaves? Li Wei, for his part, kept his distance. He wanted to rush to her, to take her hand and tell her he would shoulder every burden she carried. But he remembered the look in her eyes when she shouted at him, We just want to stand on our own. So he found other ways. Paying the rent anonymously. Having his assistant arrange for cheaper medical supplies to reach her mother. Quietly transferring funds to the cafe so the manager would keep Lin Xiao employed no matter what. Each act was invisible, almost hidden. Yet each was done with a care that went beyond responsibility. It was affection, silent but unwavering. Still, he ached for her to see him, not just his help. It happened late one rainy evening. Lin Xiu had just finished her cleaning shift at an office building downtown. She carried her umbrella, broken from the wind, and her shoes were soaked through. As she hurried across the slick pavement toward the bus stop, the roar of tires cut through the storm. A car sped recklessly around the corner, its headlights blinding. She froze. The screech of brakes echoed through the night. But before she could react, a pair of strong arms pulled her back with such force she stumbled into a warm chest. Her heart pounded wildly as the car swerved past, splashing dirty water in its wake, before disappearing into the rain. When she lifted her head, she was staring right into Li Wei's face. Rain dripping down his hair, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "Are you insane?" His voice cracked, harsher than usual. "Running across the street without looking?" Her lips trembled, but no words came out. He pulled her fully into his arms then, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "If I'd been 1 second late," his voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." The rain poured harder, soaking them both, but neither moved. For the first time, Lin Xiu felt his heartbeat against hers. Fast, unsteady, real. Not the composed CEO, not the perfect pilot, but a man terrified of losing her. Her walls wavered. She whispered, barely audible, "Why are you always here? Why do you keep following me?" He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his own glistening under the streetlight. "Because I can't not be here. Because every time you push me away, I just want to stay closer. Because you don't even realize," he swallowed hard, his voice breaking, "you've already become the most important person in my life." Her breath caught. His words burned through the icy shield around her chest. For so long, she had carried everything alone. For so long, she had told herself she didn't need anyone. But in this moment, drenched in rain, held tightly in arms that trembled with sincerity, she felt something dangerous, the desire to lean on him. She shook her head quickly, stepping back, though her body screamed at her not to. "Stop saying things like that. We're not real. This marriage, it's just a deal." His gaze hardened, but not with anger, with determination. "Then let me prove to you it doesn't have to be." The first crack. That night, Li Wei insisted on walking her home despite her protests. He held the umbrella over her even though he was the one getting wet. At her apartment door, she turned, her voice softer than before. "Thank you for saving me." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "You don't need to thank me. I'll always be there, whether you want me to or not." She looked at him for a long moment, her heart warring with her mind. Finally, she whispered, "Good night," before slipping inside. Li Wei stood in the hallway long after the door closed, rain dripping from his hair. He didn't care, because tonight, for the first time he had seen it, a crack in her walls, a small, fragile opening, and he was determined to widen it, not with force, but with patience, with love. The morning after the accident, Lin Xiu woke up with her body still trembling from the memory of Li Wei's embrace. His words echoed endlessly in her ears. "You've already become the most important person in my life." She buried her face into her pillow, trying to silence the flutter in her chest. "No, Lin Xiu, don't be stupid. You can't afford feelings. You can't afford to hope." But even as she forced herself out of bed, she knew something inside her had shifted. The cafe was unusually busy that afternoon. Lin Xiu tied her apron quickly and got to work, balancing trays, taking orders, cleaning tables. She liked being busy. It kept her mind from wandering back to last night. But then, a hush fell across the room. The customers looked toward the entrance, whispering. Lin Xiu followed their gazes and froze. A woman, elegant and dignified, stepped inside. She wore a fitted ivory suit, a pearl necklace gleaming against her neck, and a sharp gaze that made people instinctively step aside. Two assistants followed closely behind her. Lin Xiao's stomach sank. She didn't need anyone to tell her who it was. Madame Li Wei's mother. Madame Li's heels clicked against the tiled floor as she walked straight to the counter. Her presence demanded silence. Lin Xiao's hands trembled slightly as she set down the tray she was holding. "You must be Lin Xiao," Madame Li said coolly, her voice carrying authority. "The girl who calls herself my son's wife." The word stung, sharp and deliberate. Customers exchanged glances, pretending not to eavesdrop. Lin Xiao bowed slightly, her voice steady though her chest tightened. "Yes, madam. I am Lin Xiao." Madame Li's lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. "Interesting. When Wei told me he had married, I imagined someone different. Someone who would at least match his status, his background, his world." She paused, her eyes sweeping over Lin Xiao's worn apron and tired eyes. "Instead, I find a girl serving coffee." The humiliation was sharp, but Lin Xiao lifted her chin. "This is honest work, madam. I don't see shame in it." That answer seemed to irk Madame Li more. Her voice grew icier. "Listen carefully, young lady. Whatever fantasy you're living in, it ends today. You may have tricked my son into this arrangement, but you will not trap him. Tell me your price and leave him." Lin Xiao's breath caught. Around them, the cafe grew quieter still, tension thick in the air. She wanted to shout, to throw back that she hadn't tricked anyone, that she had been dragged into this. But she held her composure. "I don't want your money, madam," she said softly but firmly. "And I'm not leaving unless your son tells me to." A sharp voice cut through the air. "And who gave you the right to decide that for me, mother?" Everyone turned. Li Wei stood at the entrance, tall and commanding, still in his pilot's uniform from a flight he had just returned from. His eyes burned with anger, not at Lin Xiao, but at the woman who had given him life. Madame Li stiffened. "Wei!" He walked forward, his gaze never leaving her. "I told you before, didn't I? Stop interfering in my marriage. Stop humiliating my wife." Gasps rippled through the cafe. Customers who had been pretending not to listen now stared openly. Lin Xiao's heart pounded. "Wife." He had said it so clearly, so deliberately, in front of everyone. Madame Li's expression tightened. "Wei, do you even hear yourself? Look at her. Look at this place. How can you call her your wife? What will people say? Our family's name." "I don't care about the family's name." Li Wei cut her off sharply. "I care about her." The silence that followed was deafening. Li Wei stepped in front of Lin Xiao, almost shielding her with his presence. His voice softened, though it still carried authority. "Mother, I will not let you insult her again. If you have a problem with our marriage, you have it with me, not her." For the first time, Madame Li faltered. She had never seen her son so defiant, so resolute. "You're blinded," she whispered fiercely. This girl will ruin you." "No," Li Wei said firmly. His hand reached back, lightly brushing against Lin Xiao's. "She's the one saving me." Lin Xiao's breath hitched. Her eyes stung, her chest tightening. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was declaring something much deeper, something real. Madame Li's eyes glistened with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Fine. If this is the path you've chosen, then prepare for the consequences. Don't expect me to welcome her into the Li family." With that, she turned sharply and left, her assistants scurrying after her. After the storm, the cafe slowly came back to life, whispers buzzing everywhere. But Li Wei ignored them all. He turned to Lin Xiao, his expression softening instantly. "Are you all right?" Lin Xiao nodded slowly, though her voice trembled. You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said simply, his eyes holding hers with quiet intensity. "I did." For a moment, the world faded. The noise of the cafe, the curious stares, everything. It was just the two of them, standing together in defiance of everything trying to tear them apart. And for the first time, Lin Xiao wasn't sure if she could still convince herself this was just a deal. The next morning, Lin Xiao woke up to a buzzing phone on her nightstand. She rubbed her eyes, reached for it, and froze. Her WeChat was exploding. Xiao, is that really you in the news? Oh my god. You're married to Captain Li Wei? Girl, you're trending on Weibo. Her heart dropped. She quickly opened the links. And there it was. Photos, grainy but unmistakable, of yesterday's confrontation at the cafe. Top pilot Li Wei publicly defends his wife against his mother. Who is Lin Xiao? The mystery woman married to China Airlines golden boy. From coffee girl to CEO's bride. A modern Cinderella? Each headline made her stomach knot tighter. The pictures captured every angle. Her apron, her flushed face, Li Wei stepping in front of her like a shield, his hand brushing hers. Suddenly, her private life wasn't private anymore. In the Li family's mansion, Madame Li sat stiffly in the living room, scrolling through the same headlines. Her face turned pale with fury. This girl, she hissed, slamming her tablet onto the glass table. She's turning my son into a spectacle. The whole country is laughing. Her husband, Chairman Li, looked over his newspaper calmly. Or admiring, he muttered. Wei has always been admired for his integrity. Standing by his wife only raises his reputation. Madame Li glared at him. Reputation? Do you know what circles are saying? That our family has brought in a waitress as a daughter-in-law. That our son has lost his mind. But the chairman only chuckled softly, as if amused. Perhaps that girl is stronger than you think. Back at the cafe, Lin Xiao couldn't concentrate that day. Customers didn't come for coffee anymore. They came to stare. Some smiled at her kindly. Some whispered behind their hands. A few sneered, as if she had committed a crime by marrying Li Wei. Her co-workers tried to protect her, but gossip spread like wildfire. During her break, she slipped into the staff room, sinking onto the bench, burying her face in her hands. I never asked for this. Why does it feel like the world is collapsing on me? Just then, her phone buzzed again. A message from Li Wei. Don't work today. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. Her heart jumped. Pick me up? Before she could reply, she heard the rumble of a luxury car outside. Curious eyes followed as she walked out of the cafe. And there he was, standing beside his sleek black Bentley, sunglasses on, looking effortlessly commanding. Li Wei opened the passenger door for her himself, ignoring the stares and flashing phones. Come, he said softly. She hesitated. Everyone's watching. I know, he said, meeting her eyes. That's why I came, so they can all see. Her heart skipped. Against her better judgment, she stepped into the car. As they drove, silence filled the space. Lin Xiao stared out the window, her chest tight. Finally, she whispered, Why are you doing this? You're making yourself a target. Li Wei glanced at her, his voice firm. Because yesterday made me realize something. I don't want to hide you anymore. I don't want you to feel like you're temporary. You're my wife, Lin Xiao, and it's time everyone knows it. Her breath caught. She turned to him, shocked. Li Wei. Before she could say more, the car pulled up to a tall, gleaming skyscraper. The headquarters of China Airlines, where hundreds of employees and media reporters often gathered. Lin Xiao's eyes widened. Why are we here? Li Wei smiled faintly. Because I'm about to make a statement. Inside the grand lobby, whispers spread instantly as Li Wei strode in with Lin Xiao by his side. Cameras turned, reporters scrambled, and employees gawked. He didn't flinch. Instead, he guided Lin Xiao up the marble staircase to the press podium, his hands steady on her back. Flashes exploded. Microphones stretched forward. Captain Li, is this your wife? Is the marriage real? Did your family approve? Li Wei raised a hand, silencing the chaos. His voice was calm but carried the authority of a man used to commanding a cockpit. Yes, this is my wife, Lin Xiao. The room erupted. He continued, his tone sharper now. I don't care what rumors are spread, or how anyone looks at her. She is my wife. I married her because I chose her, and anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me. The weight of his words fell like thunder. Lin Xiu's breath trembled as she stood beside him, her face flushed. She wanted to hide, but also, for the first time, she felt a strange, burning pride. By the time they left the building, the internet was already ablaze. Hashtags shot to the top of Weibo. Hashtag Captain Lee protects his wife. Hashtag Cinderella or true love. Hashtag who is Lin Xiu. Some praised him. Some criticized. But one thing was certain, their marriage was no longer a secret. That night, as the car drove them back, Lin Xiu finally spoke, her voice soft. You didn't have to do that. I would have endured it. Li Wei turned to her, his gaze steady, almost tender. I know you would have, but I don't want you to endure. I want you to live. The words sank deep, stirring something inside her that terrified her more than the gossip or the media, because she could feel herself falling. Falling for the man she promised herself she would never love. The world outside was still buzzing with their scandal, but inside their private space, things were changing in ways Lin Xiu could hardly describe. At first, she thought Li Wei's dramatic announcement at the airline's headquarters was just another performance to protect their deal. A smart pilot trying to shield his fake wife from gossip. But then he didn't stop. He began showing up at the cafe more often, sometimes in full uniform straight from the cockpit, sometimes dressed casually with a baseball cap pulled low. At first, he pretended to be there just for coffee. He'd sit by the window, a book in his hand, but his eyes would always drift to her. The way she pushed stray strands of hair behind her ear. The way she leaned down to listen patiently to an elderly customer. The way she laughed quietly with her coworkers, never loud, but soft, like bells. And every time she caught him looking, he would only smile. That gentle, disarming smile that seemed to say, yes, I was watching you, and I don't regret it. For a man who had spent years flying above clouds, who had women throwing themselves at his feet in airports across the world, this new feeling both amazed and unsettled him. Li Wei had never fallen so deep, so fast, and yet it didn't feel reckless. Felt right. One evening, Lin Xiu stayed late at the cafe, cleaning tables after the last customer left. She didn't notice him standing outside, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, simply watching. Through the glass, he admired how she hummed softly while stacking chairs, how even after a long day she carried herself with quiet strength. He thought, how did I live this long without knowing someone like her existed? When she finally noticed him, she almost dropped the tray she was carrying. You're still here? She asked, stepping out into the night air. Li Wei shrugged, a boyish grin tugging at his lips. What can I say? Maybe I like watching you work. Her cheeks burned, and she quickly looked away. That's strange. Then let me be strange, he said softly, almost to himself. At home later that night, Lin Xiu lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her heart was beating far too quickly for her own comfort. She pressed her palms together and whispered into the stillness of her tiny room. Dear Jesus, I don't understand what's happening. This was supposed to be fake. Just money to help Mama and my siblings. But now he's different. He's kind, gentle, and he makes me feel safe. Lord, if he is truly from you, if he's really my soulmate, please direct my heart. Help me to open it. And if he's not, guard me. Don't let me fall. Tears slipped down her cheeks as peace quietly settled over her. She didn't know the future, but she trusted the one who held it. Days later, Li Wei offered to drive her home after another long shift. Inside the car, Lin Xiu dozed off against the window, exhaustion finally winning. Her head tilted slightly, strands of hair falling across her face. Li Wei glanced at her, his chest tightening in a way he had never felt before. Carefully, as though she were the most precious thing he'd ever touched, he reached over and tucked the hair behind her ear. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. So he just sat there for a moment, watching her sleep, his lips curving into the softest smile. In his heart, he whispered silently, Lin Xiu, I don't care if this started as fake. To me, this is the most real thing I've ever known. When they reached her home, he didn't wake her right away. He let her sleep a little longer, just admiring her peaceful face, memorizing the quiet beauty of the moment. In the days that followed, their relationship shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. Li Wei no longer acted like a man desperate to cover up a marriage for convenience. He treated Lin Xiao with genuine tenderness, sometimes walking her to work, sometimes waiting outside just to make sure she got home safe. And Lin Xiao, though she tried to guard her heart, she could feel the walls slowly crumbling. When she prayed at night, she no longer asked God to remove him from her life. Instead, she prayed for wisdom to know how to love him if he truly was her gift from heaven. And with every smile, every glance, every small act of care, Li Wei unknowingly drew her closer. One evening, as they stood together on her tiny apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights, Li Wei suddenly spoke. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think love was dramatic, fireworks, chaos, passion so wild it burned everything down. But now, with you, I'm learning it can be simple, gentle. Just standing here feels like enough." Lin Xiao's breath caught. She turned her head slightly, and their eyes met in the glow of the street lamps. Her heart whispered something she wasn't ready to admit aloud yet, that she was falling. Slowly but surely falling. The city was alive with its usual evening rhythm. Honking cars, glowing billboards, vendors calling out their final sales before nightfall. But inside Lin Xiao's small apartment, things felt quieter, softer. The night was cool, and for once, she wasn't rushing off to her next job. Instead, she sat by the tiny table near the window, sipping warm tea. Across from her sat Li Wei. He wasn't dressed in his commanding pilot uniform tonight. Instead, he wore a simple gray sweater and black slacks. Yet somehow, to Lin Xiao, he looked no less dignified. He had brought dinner, nothing extravagant, just takeout noodles and dumplings from a place down the street. But what startled Lin Xiao was that he insisted on serving her first, then sat watching with that gentle smile as she ate. "You should eat too," she murmured, a little shy beneath his gaze. "I will," he replied softly. "But seeing you eat first feels good." Her chopsticks hesitated for a moment. Why does he say things like that so casually? Over the next few days, Li Wei's way of pursuing her was never loud. When she walked out of her shift at the cafe, he was often there. Not waiting in some showy display, but leaning casually against his car, hands in pockets, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. When her mother fell sick with a fever, Li Wei didn't panic or overstep. He simply showed up at their door with groceries, fresh medicine, and the gentlest smile. He bowed respectfully to Lin Xiao's mother, introduced himself politely, and didn't leave until he saw her settled. When Lin Xiao scolded him for spending too much on them, he only chuckled. "Money means nothing if it can't be used for someone I care about." Those words lingered in her heart like an echo. One evening, he drove her home and, instead of leaving immediately, asked softly, "Can I stay a little longer? Just for some air?" Lin Xiao hesitated but nodded. Together they stood on her narrow balcony, the night air cool against their skin, the city lights shimmering below them. They didn't speak at first. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a kind of silence that held meaning, like a melody unspoken. Then, quietly, Li Wei said, "Lin Xiao, do you know why I keep showing up?" She glanced at him, heart beating faster. "Because of our agreement?" He turned his head, eyes finding hers with such sincerity it made her breath hitch. "No, because of you. Because I want to." Her lips parted, but no words came. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he continued, voice low and steady. "When I see you, working so hard, caring for your family, smiling even when you're exhausted, I can't help but admire you. And it scares me, because I never thought I'd feel this way." His confession hung in the cool night air. Lin Xiao's heart stirs. She felt her chest tighten, not with fear but with something she had prayed about nights ago. Slowly, she clasped her hands together, a silent prayer forming in her mind. "Lord, is this what you're showing me? Is this the love you've been saving me for?" She looked at Li Wei, really looked at him, The man who could have chosen any glamorous woman in the world, yet chose to stand on her tiny balcony, content with nothing but her company. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Li Wei, you don't have to try so hard." "I'm not trying," he replied instantly, eyes soft. "This is just me. With you." Just then, a cool breeze blew across the balcony. Lin Xiao shivered lightly, and before she could react, Li Wei slipped his sweater off and draped it over her shoulders. "Better?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. She nodded, pulling the fabric tighter around her. It was warm, carrying his faint cologne, and for a moment, it felt like she was wrapped in him. He didn't push closer, didn't force anything. He simply stood beside her, watching the same city lights, his hands in his pockets. But his heart was racing, and so was hers. In that silence, Lin Xiao realized something. This love wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. It was steady, patient, warm, like a gentle fire that promised not to burn her, but to keep her safe. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run from it. The week was tiring for Lin Xiao. Between her cafe shifts and part-time cleaning job, her body ached. Yet every time she walked home, there was always a quiet joy in her heart, because somehow, she knew Li Wei would appear, whether in person or by a simple message asking if she'd eaten. She hadn't told him, but she noticed every detail. The way he always adjusted his schedule just to make sure she was safe. The way he never pressured her, only made space for her. That Friday, she expected nothing different. But when her shift ended, she walked out into the cool dusk and didn't find him by the car as usual. Her heart sank just a little. Maybe he's busy tonight. But then her phone buzzed. From Li Wei. "Don't take the bus. Walk to the corner street by the bookshop." Puzzled, Lin Xiao tucked her phone away and obeyed. There, waiting by the quiet corner, was Li Wei, dressed simply again, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "Where are we going?" she asked, tilting her head. "You'll see." He opened the car door for her, and they drove out of the city center, past busy streets until the lights grew fewer and the night opened up into quiet roads. After about 30 minutes, he stopped the car near a small garden just outside the city. It wasn't fancy, just a wooden gate, small lanterns lining a path, and beyond it, a little greenhouse glowing warmly from the inside. "What is this place?" Lin Xiao asked, stepping out curiously. Li Wei's eyes softened. "You said once you loved flowers but never had time to visit the botanical gardens. So, I thought maybe I could bring the garden to you." He pushed the door open. Inside, the greenhouse was filled with blooming orchids, roses, and delicate lilies, each one carefully lit by tiny fairy lights. A small table sat in the middle, set with 2 steaming cups of tea and a plate of warm pastries. Lin Xiao froze, her lips parting. "You did this?" He rubbed the back of his neck, slightly sheepish. "I asked a friend who owns the place for help. It's not much, but I wanted you to have one evening where you don't think about work. Just breathe." They sat down, and for once, Lin Xiao allowed herself to relax. The air was fragrant with flowers, and the quiet hum of crickets filled the night. Li Wei poured tea into her cup before his own, then leaned back, watching her. Not with the gaze of a man expecting gratitude, but with the peace of someone simply happy to see her smile. "You really didn't have to do all this?" she murmured, tracing the rim of the teacup. "I know," he said, voice steady. "But I wanted to, because you deserve to be cherished, Lin Xiao. Not for what you do, but for who you are." Her heart trembled. Few people in her life had ever spoken to her like that. She looked at him across the table. A man who could have bought diamonds and dresses to impress, but instead gave her time, thought, and gentleness. "Li Wei," she began softly. "I don't know what God is doing, but I've been praying, asking him if this us is something real. If you're really the person he's placing in my life." His breath caught, and his chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand but stopped himself, giving her the space to speak. "I'm scared," she admitted, eyes glistening. "Because my life has always been hard, and sometimes I don't believe happiness can last for me. But when I'm with you, it feels different. Safe. And that scares me too. Li Wei leaned forward, his voice gentle, almost reverent. Then let me be the man who proves to you that love can be safe. That God really does write good love stories. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world outside the greenhouse ceased to exist. As they left the greenhouse later, walking side by side beneath the quiet stars, Li Wei found himself glancing at her again and again. Every step made his desire to hold her hand stronger. Finally, he blurted, half laughing at himself, "Lin Xiu, I don't know how long I can keep calling this a fake marriage." Her steps faltered, her eyes widening. He quickly looked away, running a hand through his hair. "What I mean is, I'm falling for you, deeper than I've ever fallen for anyone. And it's not pretend for me anymore." Lin Xiu's heart pounded wildly. She lowered her gaze, her lips curving into the faintest, trembling smile. She didn't answer immediately, but inside, she whispered another prayer, one filled with both fear and hope. "Lord, maybe this is the beginning of something real." The days following Li Wei's quiet confession felt different for Lin Xiu. Nothing was said outright. She hadn't given him a definite answer, hadn't even told him whether she felt the same. Yet, his words echoed in her heart again and again. "I'm falling for you, deeper than I've ever fallen for anyone." She would remember it while washing dishes, while carrying stacks of books at the cafe, even when she prayed at night. And every time, her heart beat a little faster, though she tried to calm herself. That Monday morning, Lin Xiu left her apartment early for her cleaning shift at a small office building. As she stepped outside, she nearly dropped her bag. There, leaning against his sleek black car with his arms crossed and a grin that looked entirely too casual for how early it was Li Wei. "Good morning, Mrs. Pilot," he teased, eyes glinting. Her cheeks flushed instantly. "Why are you here so early?" He straightened, moving to open the car door for her. "Because I knew you'd skip breakfast again. And I can't allow my wife to work on an empty stomach." She blinked, confused, until he handed her a small brown paper bag. Inside was a warm pork bun, soy milk, and her favorite egg tart, the same one she had once mentioned in passing weeks ago. Her chest tightened. "You remembered?" Li Wei gave her that boyish half-smile. "I remember everything about you, Lin Xiu, even the little things." Butterflies filled her stomach, scattering wildly. She ducked her head, mumbling, "You're too much." He leaned down slightly, whispering just close enough to make her heart skip. "No, you're just worth it." Later that week, it rained heavily in the evening. Lin Xiu didn't expect him. She thought he must be busy with his flights. She braved the storm, clutching her thin umbrella, trying to hurry home. But halfway down the street, her umbrella flipped inside out, nearly pulling from her hands. She squealed in frustration, rain soaking through her thin jacket. Suddenly, a strong arm reached out, tugging her under the shelter of a broad, black umbrella. She turned, and there he was again, tall and steady, his shoulder already wet from covering her. "You'll catch a cold like this," he scolded softly, her lips parted in surprise. "Li Wei, how did you?" "I track the weather," he said simply, as though it were the most normal thing in the world to rush across the city just to shield her from rain. As they walked together, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers, Lin Xiu could feel her heart galloping. He wasn't just protecting her from rain. It felt like he was protecting her whole world. A few days later, Li Wei asked gently, "Can I visit your family again?" Lin Xiu hesitated. Her family lived simply, and she still feared what they might think of him. But when she saw the sincerity in his eyes, she agreed. That Sunday, he came, not with expensive gifts or flashy gestures, but with bags of fresh groceries and a cheerful smile. Her younger siblings squealed with joy when he crouched down to help them with their homework, patiently explaining math problems. Her mother, who had always been cautious, softened visibly as she watched Li Wei quietly help chop vegetables in the kitchen. At one point, Lin Xiu walked in to find him cooking beside her mother, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something her mother said. It was a picture she never expected to see. The wealthy CEO pilot, looking perfectly at ease in their tiny kitchen. Her heart melted. When dinner ended, her mother whispered to her, "That man. He looks at you as if you're his whole world. Be careful, sure. But don't push away a blessing if it's really from God." Lin Xiao could barely speak, her throat tight with emotion. That night, Li Wei offered to walk her home from her family's house. The streets were quiet, the air cool. They walked side by side in silence until suddenly, he reached out, hesitant, as if afraid she might pull away, and gently took her hand. Lin Xiao froze, her heart hammering. His palm was warm, steady, covering hers completely. He didn't say anything, didn't make it dramatic. Just held her hand as though it was the most natural thing in the world. But his eyes, when she glanced up at him, the way he looked at her almost stole her breath. It wasn't desire or impatience. It was devotion, something deep, unshakable. "Lin Xiao," he said softly, voice rough with emotion. "I don't need anything else in this life. Just let me keep walking like this with you." Her lips trembled, tears stinging her eyes. Butterflies filled her chest so strongly she thought she might burst. She didn't answer in words, only tightened her fingers around his hand. Her silent way of saying she was beginning to trust him. And for Li Wei, that single small gesture was worth more than any spoken yes. The evening after they had walked hand in hand for the first time, Lin Xiao found herself restless. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the warmth of his palm around hers, the way his voice had trembled with sincerity. "Let me keep walking like this with you." Her chest ached with something she hadn't dared to name yet. So she prayed quietly, as she always did. "Dear Jesus, if this is truly from you, then guide my heart. Don't let me step into something that isn't your will. But if Li Wei, if he really is the one, then help me open my heart to him." The next day, Li Wei called her out unexpectedly. "Meet me tonight. I want to show you something." Curious and a little nervous, she agreed. When she arrived, he led her up to the rooftop of one of his company's hangars. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the dark velvet sky. Planes rested silently below, their silver wings glinting under the floodlights. He stood with his hands in his pockets, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "You always said you loved the skies," he murmured. "So I thought, maybe I could give you a better view tonight." Lin Xiao's lips curved into a soft smile. "It's beautiful." But as she turned to gaze at the stars, she felt his eyes on her instead. She didn't dare meet his gaze, afraid her heart might give her away. "Lin Xiao." His voice was low, almost hesitant. She turned, and then froze. Li Wei wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking only at her. His eyes, dark and deep, carried no trace of the confident pilot everyone else saw. They were tender, vulnerable, as if bearing his very soul. "I need to say this again," he continued, stepping closer, "because once wasn't enough. I don't want you to think it was just the heat of the moment last time." Her breath caught. "I'm falling for you, no. I've already fallen for you. Completely. I don't want a fake marriage anymore. I don't want just a name on paper. I want you, all of you. Your smiles, your tears, your late-night prayers, your stubborn strength, everything." As he spoke, he reached up slowly, hesitating at first, then gently letting his index finger glide down the curve of her cheek. The touch was feather-light, reverent, as though she were something fragile and precious. Her eyes burned with tears she didn't want to shed. And then, with a deep breath, he leaned forward, closing his eyes, and pressed a slow, tender kiss against her forehead. Lin Xiao's world stilled. His lips were warm, lingering not out of passion but out of love, devotion, and a promise unsaid. She closed her eyes too, letting her heart absorb the weight of it. When he finally pulled back, his voice broke slightly. "I want to start something real with you, Lin Xiao. A real wedding, a real marriage. Not for appearances, not for my mother, not for money. Just because you're the one I can't stop choosing over and over." She stood there, her heart trembling. Part of her still feared. She had nothing compared to him. She was just a poor girl helping her family survive. How could she walk into the world of a man like him? But the way he was looking at her, as though she were his entire sky. Her lips parted, but her voice was shaky. Li Wei, I don't know if I deserve this. He caught her hand, squeezing it firmly, not letting her retreat. No, don't ever say that. Lin Xiu, you're the only one I've ever looked at this way. You deserve the whole world, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. Her tears finally slipped free, and she let out a soft laugh, embarrassed. You make it hard to breathe when you talk like that. He chuckled, wiping her cheek gently with his thumb. Good, because you've stolen all of my breath, too. Quiet embrace. Under the vast night sky, he pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest. His embrace wasn't hurried or demanding. It was steady, protective, the kind of embrace that said you're safe with me. Lin Xiu let her head rest against his heart, listening to its rapid, uneven beat. She felt her own matching its rhythm. For the first time, she didn't fight the warmth blooming inside her. She didn't run from it. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered, almost too soft for him to hear, if this really is from God, then maybe I can believe it too. Li Wei's arms tightened around her, and for the first time since they met, both of them felt as if the line between pretend and real had finally disappeared. If you watched till the end, we're glad. I hope you enjoyed their love story. Stay with us, don't go far. We'd be sure to bring you more amazing, heart-flattering, clean romance love stories. Do well to subscribe our channel and leave us a comment what you think about this story. We hope to see you again.